Today is March 25th, 2022. We are going to start our 12th interview. This is our 12th one, Grandpa. It's
Wow.
And we're not very far. We haven't even, we're still in the 50s, which is for me a long time away. So today I'm hoping that we can get into some big events. At least I would think that there would be big events. Maybe get into like basically we're in the early 50s. We talked about last week about your job, but I want to get into your personal life and things such as like Mark's birth, and maybe get all the way up to, I don't know about my mom's birth, or if we'll get in, depending on how many stories you have. That's the general area. So I don't know.
Okay. What do you remember where we left off?
Let's start from the beginning, actually, because we got the last video got slightly cut off. So you were going to tell me a story about Mark.
You remember?
What?
I don't.
Tell me about Mark's birth, because you said there was something going on with it, and you started to allude to it, but I don't actually know what was going on or what happened.
Let me search to see if I can recover something.
Okay.
On July 4th, 1952, what is the name of the lady that swam from Catalina to Los Angeles Harbor? Ah, I see it. Thank you. Okay.
And we have proof on video now that you are quite tech savvy at 98, using Siri to find the information you want. So,
have you ever heard of Florence Chadwick?
just a tiny bit. Partly because I looked her up last time we talked, because you had just mentioned that, and that's when we got cut off.
Okay. So let's. We won't talk. There's no point in talking about Esther's pregnancy with Mark.
Why not?
Everybody knows about that.
I don't know anything about it.
Okay.
Actually, I don't know anything about it.
When Esther became pregnant, she was supposed to deliver sometime in late June and early July. And so on the morning of July the 3rd, I got up as usual and went to work. Didn't think anything about it. Esther showed no signs of delivery. So I went to work at Lockheed Aircraft Service. Sometime between say noon and mid-afternoon, my lead man came up to me and said I had a phone call in the office. So I went with him to the office, and it was, I believe it was Mae telling me that Esther was on her way to the hospital. Now, we lived in what was then Van Nuys and is today known as Lake Balboa, California. But that she was on her way to the hospital, Cedars of Lebanon in Los Angeles. So I knew where Cedars was. So I clocked out and started my journey to fatherhood, so to speak. I got to Cedars, went up to the maternity floor. And in those days, fathers were separated from mothers by literally a wall. I saw Esther. She was fine. We conversed for a few minutes, and then I was shooed out. This was probably in mid-afternoon. I'm not sure what time of the day it was.
Did they allow other women to stay in there? Like, was Mae allowed to stay with her? Do you remember?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I know I did not see her until after she delivered Mark. I'm pretty sure. My mind is a little fuzzy. But what I do remember is they had a room for fathers and they had a TV set. There were a couple of guys in there waiting for delivery. Nobody paid much attention to the TV, nor neither did I. I'm not sure what I did waiting, but pretty soon they became dinner time. I'm not sure whether I had dinner or not. But what I do remember was in the early evening, I was watching TV when they switched on this special event. What did I say her name was again? Florence Chadwick.
Florence Chadwick.
Yeah, okay. So Florence Chadwick was swimming from Catalina to Los Angeles Harbor. It's 20 miles from Catalina to Los Angeles Harbor, and what's the name of the city in Catalina?
Avalon.
Avalon is just about due south. If you were on a boat and were leaving going through the breakwater of Los Angeles, if you headed due south, you would run into Catalina after 20 miles. Well, this was just the reverse. July 4th, it's just after midsummer, so it's light until after 8 o'clock, and they were following the swimmer swimming north. So as I remember it, I'm waiting for Esther to deliver and watching Ruth Chadwick. I watched her for most of the night. I'm not sure when she arrived in Los Angeles Harbor, and I know I didn't fall asleep. I was awake all night, and sometime in the early morning. And remember, I haven't seen Esther since then. I'm told that she is in the process of delivery, and I still haven't seen her. And I'm not sure what time Mark was born, but eventually, sometimes in early to mid-morning on July 4th, 1952, Mark Stephen Richards was born. He weighed roughly 6 pounds. And when I saw him, he had his thumb, I think he had his thumb in his mouth. And on his right ear, there was a big blob of something that looked like a big wart. Somebody had taken a thread, probably surgical thread, wrapped it around it and looped it a few times and pulled tight. And somebody said that would starve it and would eventually fall off, which it did. But that was how Mark was born. Mae was there. Most of the family was there, including my mother, maybe some friends. I'm not sure. There were a lot of people there on the morning of July 4th, primarily because it was a holiday. People weren't working, and it was a joyous time.
I can imagine. What was
Yes.
it like being, do you remember how you were feeling? Were you nervous about being a father, or were you, or is it just?
No, I'm not sure what my thoughts were. Probably this is part of the life experience. You become a father, and hopefully it will work out well.
So I imagine you guys, she was in the hospital for a few days, I imagine. It sounds like everything was straightforward.
Yeah, let's see. When was July? Let's see what day July 4th, 1952 was. Come on, phone.
It was a Friday.
Friday?
Friday.
Okay. Well, not only was it a holiday, but it was
Long weekend.
a long weekend, a 3-day weekend, right. Do you want me to go on from there?
Yeah, we can. It's, I'll ask you questions unless you have certain stories you want to tell me about this period. I'm curious about how things were when you guys got back to the house. How did it change, life with young baby Mark?
I would guess Esther probably came home on a Sunday. Maybe it was Saturday, Friday. Probably, I'm not sure they would keep her in for a day. I'm not sure what the protocol was back in those days. I'm pretty sure she came home by Sunday. My mother volunteered to stay to help us get started off with mother and fatherhood. I know she stayed for a week or 10 days till Esther got back on her feet reasonably well. Now began the life of feeding Mark, changing diapers, feeding Mark. I'm trying to remember. Mark was mostly bottle fed. He probably was a little breastfed. I'm not sure what happened on that, but we went through what all new parents go through on their babies.
With your house, it was a 2-bedroom at this time, right?
What?
The house Lemay, it was a 2-bedroom at this time? Before your additions?
Well, we had moved into the house on Lemay Place. We had moved in late December of 1950. So our home was pretty well established. It was it was furnished. We had appliances, had a big refrigerator. Actually, we had, and my Aunt Molly somehow found a refrigerator for us. I think we paid $200 for it. One of the first self-defrosting refrigerators. The house was furnished. We had we had a baby's room. Our bedroom was furnished. I'm not sure whether there was anything in the third bedroom which we used for a den or not. We had a dining room table. We had a kitchen table. The house was pretty well furnished, and we had drapes in the front room. I kind of we ordered the drapes. I kind of messed up on that. I measured the drapes. Now, when I measure something at the time, it was my practice to measure in feet and inches. How high was the ceiling? Well, we measured the ceiling. It was 8 feet. It was 8 feet and inches. Normal ceilings, I think, are 98 or 100 inches, or 8 feet and 4 inches, whatever it was. And anyway, we ordered drapes. Instead of having somebody come in to take measurements, this was a big lesson I learned then. Apparently, it was the practice where the customer submitted measurements. Anyway, I put up, I measured in feet and inches. Whatever it was, my measurements ended up, and we got the drapes. They were almost 2 feet off the floor. And that's how I found out when you make measurements for rugs or anything like that, it's done in inches and not feet and inches. So we had the drapes altered a little bit, extended. Now the drapes had kind of like a horizontal weave in them, so the addition we put on there really wasn't noticeable, and no great harm was done.
So you guys, so you made up a nursery for Mark for
yeah, we had a crib, a dresser. We had a little table that for the baby, where you could change his diaper, or if you wanted to bathe him, it had a little tray underneath there for bathing babies, and there was a container to put in dirty diapers, and we had everything that the nursery was supposed to have. Yeah.
That sounds like the room that I had for my kids. It hasn't changed. Yeah, you had all this. You had all the equipment back then.
You had the only thing, the equipment. What you have doesn't change. How the equipment works changes with technology. Yeah. Okay. And so we had our first child. We went through the process of feeding and getting up, making baby bottles, and uh, and integrating the life of raising and taking care of a baby, integrating that with the rest of our life. You know the act. Everybody does that's had babies.
Yeah, but it varies for different people. Some babies are a little bit more more work than others. Some are easier, you know, and there's always a and most of your other your like Mae and Sam, the other and your sister, a lot of them did they already have children at this point? Was it pretty
Okay,
most of the
okay. Mark was born in 52. Mae and Sam had their first child, Sharon. She was, I believe, born in the fall of 1949. I know Sharon was a baby when Esther and I were dating. I remember something I did once in the 1950. I bought a new car. Back then, the Studebaker came out with a model. There's a line of small cars I think were called Champions, and they had a two-door coupe, but they called it the Starlight coupe because instead of having just one window in the back, there was a series of 5 windows that wrapped around from the B post around the back from one side of the car to the other. So the visibility to the rear was real negated, called a Starlight coupe. And the front of the car for a grill, they had a round chrome ring. And it's just something I kind of liked, and I bought it. And it was a kind of like a cream yellow. It wasn't yellow, it was more of a cream with a yellowish tinge. And it had a 3-speed manual transmission there, and with an overdrive, which in effect made it a 4-speed transmission. The overdrive worked by when you went above a certain speed, somewhere in the mid 30 miles an hour. If you took your foot off the accelerator, it would click in 4th drive, which was called overdrive then. It's also the car we used to drive back to Iowa and Nebraska on our honeymoon. Getting back to Sharon, Esther and I was dating Esther then, and she lived with her parents on, I believe, Oakwood Avenue, which is north of La Brea. Check that. Let's see how these streets are. La Brea Avenue run north and south. So it was west of La Brea and north of, can't think of the street. Oakwood Avenue in Los Angeles.
That's okay. Yeah,
Okay, what's west, or when you go east, okay, Oakwood runs east and west, right? Oakwood Avenue. It's in the Hollywood area.
I'm looking it up. I don't remember. No, I think we've talked about this. You're asking about.
Yeah, some major east-west streets there, where for the farmers market was off of Fairfax to the west, but north of farmers market there was
Rosewood, there's Melrose, or I'm looking for there's Oakwood, there's to call it, north of the farmers market, there's Beverly, then there's Oakwood, then Rosewood, then Clinton, then Melrose.
No, I'm talking about a major street, not a residential street. What's south
Beverly,
of
Melrose.
Is that Beverly Boulevard?
I said Beverly.
Beverly Boulevard.
There's also
okay.
Also,
I forget the name of the street we lived on, but it wasn't too far from where Esther's parents had their home on Oakwood. Only we were west of Western Avenue, and maybe Western and Beverly, in the Western Beverly area. Okay, okay. Now to get back to Sharon and the Studebaker, I was parked in front of Esther's parents' house, and we were out, and for whatever reason, we were standing in front of the house. Apparently, I first met Mae and Sam. Apparently, that was the first time I saw them. I'm not sure, and they were holding Sharon. Sharon was a baby. She was born in September of 49, and now we're talking about November. Okay, so I put for whatever reason, they had put a blanket on the hood of the car, and Sharon ended up on the hood of the car with the blanket tucked all around her. Then I think they put a ribbon around under the blanket, so now Sharon's head stuck out of the blanket, sitting on the hood of the car. I had a picture of that, and I was searching for it, and I never could find it. That was the first time I saw Sharon. As far as meeting, I've already talked about the way Esther and I met at Park Manor dancing. Yeah. Okay. Mae and Sam were living in the Culver City area at that time in a small house they had rented, and I went over and picked up Esther, and she told me we went over to meet her twin sister and her husband. Now, I met Mae and Sam, and we had a pleasant evening, and it was the beginning of a lifelong relationship. Somehow my association with twins, somehow I seem to gather them like magnets. My first association with twins was when I was in junior high school. Instead of being called mid school, they were called junior high. I went to John Muir Junior High School, which is on Vermont and 59th Street. I think I've reiterated before that John Muir Junior High School and Budlong Avenue Elementary School backed up each other, with the perimeter being on the south. The east-west street on the south was 59th. The north-south street on the west was Budlong, and the north-south street on the east was Vermont. And the east-west street on the north was shared with some homeowners, so they didn't occupy the whole 2 blocks. They just occupied the southern part of that. Anywhere, I was in junior high school, and in 2 of my classes were there were one class there were twin boys and twin girls. For whatever reasons, I became friends with both of them until I graduated from junior high school. The twins went to Manual Arts High School, and I went to Fremont High. My sister Shirley, when she started high school, we were living on 57th Street, and that was in the Manual Arts area. 2 years later, when I started high school, we had moved back to the court area. I've already talked about that in a previous session we had, and we had moved back to the court area, and we're living in the court. And when I think I showed you the house on 61st Street. We lived in there.
Yeah.
When that became vacant for some reason or other, we wanted more room, so we moved in there. Okay. So that was one occasion with twins. Now we were living on 61st Street, and I think I was still delivering papers when I met the second pair of twins, Lois and Lilas. Their last name was Wilson, and I think might have mentioned this before. I was dating Lois, but really I was dating Lilas too, because literally everywhere Lois and I went, Lilas went too. But that was okay. I dated them until I went in this. I dated Lois until I went in the service. In the summer of 1941, I believe it was, we moved to 8th Avenue for whatever reason. We'd lived on and off in the court area for a good part of the 9 years. A part of the occasion we moved out to from the court area to Bell and back to the courts again. We had moved to 67th Street and back to the courts. Now we moved to 57th Street and then back to the courts. So we were moved from the court area to the house on 61st Street, right next to the courts. That's where I lived when I bought my first car. Then we moved to Lemay Park on 8th Avenue. I believe it was 4307 and a half 8th Avenue. I'm not sure. I think you once brought that up. And in the area of apartments in California, they had lived in 4-unit buildings. There were 2 on the first floor and 2 on the second floor. I might have mentioned this before, but I'll reiterate. And they were long. There was a front room, a small dining room behind it. And then behind that was the kitchen, and the dining room is where a long hall would go back. And there were on the left there was a bathroom. There was a bedroom. On the right there was the kitchen and 2 bedrooms. I don't know why we needed 3 bedrooms, but anyway, we had them. And we lived there. We lived there through. Well, my folks lived there through the war, at least as until I lost my father. Let me get
Let's pull you back into the.
Where
I'm going to pull you back in and ask some questions. So
okay.
Pull you back to where we started off with. That's fine. So I want to try to understand like life in the early 50s, been born, or this is before, after. Like, what was your guys' social life? Like, what would you guys do on the weekends? So on a typical weekend, who were you hanging out with? Did you have people over? Were you hanging out with Mae and Sam? Take me.
Okay.
Did you guys have parties? Did you go on vacations? What were you interested in back then?
What were you interested? Well, you worked 5 days a week, and then you're going on from the time I got married. I've already talked about the GI houses in Venice. What was our weekends? The area between getting married and having 2 kids, that was roughly 3 or 3.5 years from mid year 1950 until Judy was born in the fall of, I believe, 1954. Here, getting married, raising a kid, and because Esther and Mae were so thick, our life mostly revolved around that relationship. One very seldom did anything without the other. If we didn't do it personally, they knew about it. And with the attraction that was between them, there was also the opposite side, was the constant conflict between Mae and Esther. Now, from my point of view and the way I saw this conflict, it was a part of our lives literally for as long as Esther lived, which was almost 30 years. This conflict went on for that. I don't want to go in too much about how it affected our lives, but it had an effect on me. It had an effect on our children. If you were to question them today, everybody's aware of it, but there's really no point in bringing it up. But it affected our lives, the way we lived, and I'm not sure what kind of person that it made us. I would like to think that it made me a better person in my relationship with others, because of my reluctance to become combative with other people if things didn't go my way. I was very quiet, but by nature, I'm also a lot like my mother was. She was also very quiet, never raised her voice, and in some ways, it's the way I live. And it might have been to my detriment, because I might have been a different person if my personality was a little different, a little more aggressive and assertive. I was not very assertive. Okay, enough for that.
We don't have to go into much detail on that area. I'm fine with that. I am curious though. We have time. We can continue on. I don't know much about. I don't remember Sam very well. Can you tell me a little bit about Sam, like how you guys got along and just
okay.
I don't know.
Okay, Sam was very assertive, very forceful. He didn't like working for other people. He wanted to be on his own. He wanted to be his own boss, and consequently, when I met them, Sam worked in an electrical supply house somewhere in Los Angeles. When I first met him, he left that job. I don't know whether he was fired or he quit. And then he got a job as a bread truck driver. He drove a bread truck supplying markets with bakery goods, bread and bakery goods. And to tell you what kind of relationship Mae and Esther had, was Sam, when he became a bakery driver, would have to get up probably 4:30 or something like that, 4:30, so he could go down to the bakery. He'd have to load up his truck with bakery goods and then go out and deliver them. And somehow he had a problem waking up on time. So what did Esther do? Esther would set an alarm, and she would wake up, and she'd call Sam and tell him it's time to get up. So
Esther did this, not Mae.
Esther did this, not Mae. You're right. Sharon and Jackie, if you're listening to this, I'm sure you know about it, but if you don't, just understand that Esther kept your father in a job. Okay.
Did you and
More.
Sam get along well?
What did I?
Did you
Oh,
and
I
Sam
got
get along well?
Yeah, Sam and I got along good. Probably because we were so different. We never competed in anything. Sam was a very generous person. He was very pleasant to be around. He had a quick temper. He was quick to, if he had an argument with somebody, he was very assertive in arguments, showed his temper, but he was also very accommodating and generous. I think I've told the story about the dead cat,
I'm not sure if you have.
about the cat who died in the back of a couch on their patio.
No, you
Yeah.
haven't told me this.
Oh, I'm not sure whether Sharon and Jackie know about this. If they do, they can correct me if I'm wrong in anything, and if they don't, this is what happened. This was maybe 1952, 53, 54. I'm not sure. It was in the early 50s, and Mae and Sam had I think a small patio poured in their backyard with a small barbecue and everything. They had some furniture out there. That was a modest outdoor living thing in the early 50s in the San Fernando Valley. And apparently a cat had been hit by a car on the street in the front of the house. That was Van Van, yeah, and it must have crawled back between the houses into their backyard, and they had a couch laying against the back wall of the house there. If I remember right, I'm not sure whether it was before or after they added an addition onto their house. I'm not sure. In any event, the cat crawled. There was the back of the couch usually is covered by some kind of a fabric covered, but apparently the fabric covered was torn, and the cat crawled into the inside of the couch on the bottom and died there. And after it died, of course, it decomposed. And apparently on a weekend day, began to notice an odor in the backyard. Eventually, the decomposing body of the cat was found in the couch. This was on a weekend, apparently, because there was no way to call the Department of Sanitation to pick it up. So I don't know who came up with the idea. It probably wasn't me, but what we ended up by doing was picking up the couch, and Sam and I carried it out to the front of the house. Now, at this time, Sam had a convertible, and Reseda at that time was not too well developed. The main cross streets in Reseda at that time was, the primary one was Reseda Boulevard and Sherman Way, but to the west was Reseda Boulevard and Van Owen. The intersection of Reseda and Van Owen was developed. I think there were 3 gas stations on it. I'm not sure what the 4th corner was, but behind Reseda Boulevard, especially to the west, they were just starting to develop it, and you can look for several blocks there. There was a house here or there or something like that. It was not well developed. So we put the couch across the back of the convertible over the rear seat, with the back of the couch facing away from us. And we got in the car about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And as we drove down Van Oven Street towards Reseda Boulevard, looking for a place there, we got to Reseda Boulevard. We turned and left, and we went down a block or two. And there were a few stores facing Reseda Boulevard, but there was not much developing behind. And so we went down one of the streets. There were no street lights, and at some of the intersections they had an overhead single street light, but we finally went down 2 or 3 blocks, and there was an area there where it's no houses on either side, no development there. So we got out, took the couch off the car, just set it down next to the street, and drove like hell away from there, sure that nobody had seen us. So that's the way we got rid of a dead cat.
I assume that the couch was no longer, there's no way of cleaning it. It was
Well,
couch.
I never looked in there. Sam picked up the flap, looked in there, and then closed it right away. So I don't know what he saw.
But obviously it was get rid of the entire couch, not just the cat that was inside of it.
Yeah. So now they didn't have a couch in the backyard. They probably replaced the furniture. Now there was a time, let's talk about the bond between Mae and Esther. Let's not talk about the conflict. We all know that that happened, and but let's talk about the bond between them. Now, okay. Of course, once a year they had a birthday. I think their birth date was mid-April, maybe April 14th. Sharon and Jackie, if you're listening, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Ooh, they had a birthday, and of course they always bought each other birthday cards and sometimes birthday gifts. Okay, and now as you know, they were mirror twins. They were identical mirror twins. I believe they were mirror twins, and essentially what that means is the whirly thing on the back of their head. What's it called?
The calic.
There's
a calic.
Yeah. One went left and the other one went right. So I could be wrong on this. Sharon and Jackie, correct me. Okay, but they would buy each other cards and a small gift of some time. Okay, more likely as not, they bought the same card, and sometimes they would even buy each other the same gift. Okay, this happened more likely as not. It just shows you the way they thought. We went on vacations together. If they went on vacations, sometimes if we didn't go together, if they went separately to a place, somehow we would end up going separately to the same place.
What type of places would you go?
Well,
What were the vacation hotspots back in the 50s?
We went to Yosemite probably more than once. I think we went to Catalina Island. I don't recall all the places we went, but we went to a lot of places together. They in later years, after the kids had grown up, they took a trip to Europe. They rented a car and they drove along. They went to Italy. They traveled along up to across the top of Italy and to down the eastern shore of the Adriatic Sea and the Slovak nations there, I believe. They had a story they would tell us when they were in Rome. They went to the Vatican. This was a day apparently in the summer when many of the people in Rome would take their summer vacation, and there weren't many people in the city. I'm not sure how it worked, but they went to the Vatican and they happened to come across this peddler who was selling mostly religious objects, and asked them if they wanted to. He tried to sell them some crosses or something like that, and they were in the Vatican there, and they told him, "I'm sorry, but we're not Christian." He said, "Oh, Landsman, he was Jewish." So they had a long conversation. They told him they were from California. They lived in Reseda. He said they had quite an extended conversation with him. Then eventually they left. Okay, now I've talked before about the vacation that we took in 1984 when somehow or other.
That's too.
I've talked about
Okay.
this. We were convinced that the city was going to be choked with people, so we left the city and we took a guided tour that started in London. Then we went to Paris. And then from Paris, we went to Switzerland. And then from Switzerland, we took a bus down. We went to Venice, Florence, and it finally ended in Rome. And along the way, then we flew home from Rome. So we flew to Europe to London, came back from Rome.
I assume that.
Okay, the Olympics occur in July.
I was gonna say this is with Lucille, right? This is you've gone. This is with Lucille, correct?
This was
in 1984,
right? Yeah, 1984, and since the Olympics happened in July, it's also July 1984. Nobody's in Rome. Everybody's gone on vacation. And again, we're in the Vatican. Now, I'm not thinking about Mae and Sam being in Rome in July in 1978 or 79, whenever they were there. But I see a peddler, and he comes up to us, wants to know if we wanted some religious objects, and we tell him no, we're not of the Christian faith. And he says, "Oh, Landsman." He says, "Where are you from?" It's just, we say California. And he says, "California, I have Mishpucha in Reseda." Now, this is 7 years after he met Mae and Sam. And that's what happened to us. Incidentally, Mishpucha are relatives.
That's funny. Did you guys have a good conversation with them too then?
Yeah, we conversed for a while, and then it ended. Yeah.
That's funny. I have a question before we'll probably need to cut it off. I was curious about, since
what?
Do you remember when you mentioned you would go to you went to Yosemite and stuff? Would you camp there, or would you stay in like a hotel? I was just curious if you guys.
Let's see. We were to Yosemite.
I wasn't sure if you would camp when you were younger.
More than once. It might have been 2 or 3 times, maybe more. I don't remember how many times. I remember camping with tents one time. Another time we camped. We rented little, well, they weren't cabins. What they were a frame structure, and they had a canvas covering over them.
That was probably either Curry Village or maybe Hospitality or the.
Yeah.
Oh, the name slipped my mind.
Now, another time we went camping. Let's see. I think we're Mae and Sam. I think Stanley, my cousin Stanley, was with us because we were in his car. I'm not sure whether Mae and Sam were with us or not, but the primary thing about this trip was, let's see, Stanley, Elizabeth was with us. When did this happen? I'm not sure. Okay. Anyway, we're driving up to Yosemite. We're in Stanley's car. We're somewhere between Bakersfield and Yosemite when we have a big problem with the car. There's a problem with the engine. There was knocking and clattering in the engine. And we happen to be in a small community. I think it's Highway 40 or 41 leading up.
There's 41 that goes up to Yosemite from Fresno.
Okay. So it's Highway 41, right? You're going up there, and we're in this small community. And it's probably I'm not sure whether it's the weekend or not. We're apparently on vacation. And I'm not sure whether it was going or coming. And in any event, probably we were probably coming home, I would guess. And all this clatter, and we happened to see an open garage. We go in there, and Stanley's talking to a mechanic, and Stanley knows a lot about engines. So do I, and all that. But I stay at Stanley's car. I stay out of it, and they make a deal. He's going to go into the engine to see what happens, and we'll have to wait while he does it. So we leave the car there. We find a motel or something like that, and we spend the late afternoon and the evening in this little community between Bakersfield and Yosemite. And the next morning we go back there, and the car's finished. Stanley starts it, and it's running. It sounds okay, and he tells us what he did. Now it ends up that the car had a broken piston, and apparently it didn't do any other damage to the connecting rod or the other connecting parts to the piston. He put it together again. Apparently it operated okay. And I think the bill for all of this was $60 or $70. But back then that was quite a bit of money. So there was Stan and Elizabeth, myself, and Esther, and who else? There were two more people with us. I can't remember who they were. So between all of us, we got enough to pay the bill. And on the bill, he says, after I got it fixed, I couldn't start it. So I had to put in new spark plugs. But we put the new spark plugs in, it wasn't right there. So I had to do some things to the carburetor, and he did something to the generator. So he padded his bill by about $25. Anyway, we got in, and as far as I can remember, we never had another problem with the car, because on the day this must have been in the late 19, maybe midsummer 1940, let's call it that, because on the day that Stanley was inducted into, went up to in the Navy was a Friday before January the 1st. January the 1st was on a Sunday in 1943. Sunday 1943. Let's see if I'm right. What day was January 1st, 1943? What was the day of the week on January 1st, 1943? Okay, right. The January 1st was a Friday. Saturday was January 2nd. Sunday was January 3rd. That's when I was with some. Okay, now I got it figured out. With January 3rd, and Monday was January 4th. What day of the week was the Rose Bowl game in January of 1943. Okay, it's not working on my phone. See if you can figure that out.
The Friday, January 1st,
Yes.
1943.
Okay, it seems to me as if the game was on a Sunday. That would be the second. That would be the second.
The game was on the Friday.
The game was on a Friday?
The game was on a Friday.
Okay. All right, so that was on a Friday. So I'm under the impression I was inducted. Well, the first was a holiday. Saturday was the first was on a holiday. Then apparently I was inducted on the second, and of Saturday the second. I thought it was on Sunday first. Well, okay.
It's okay.
It's
It was
okay.
a long time ago, and you're allowed to have a, I can't remember the days of the week, for anything. So the fact that you can do it,
Okay,
even have an idea.
It's.
I think
Let's call this a session. I'm tired.